Welcome to the Mike Clegg podcast, and today I'm really pleased that I've got Eammon Salmon with me. Hi Eamonn, thanks for coming. So Eamonn runs the FMPA, so that's the Football, Medicine and Performance Association. So Eamonn, this union you've actually built up over the last 9 years is something deep in my heart. I was obviously a football player, I was in the PFA, and then when I joined Sunderland as a practitioner, as a strength and conditioning coach, when I first joined there, I was just an employee, basically, going through your normal tasks, and then suddenly, 3 or 4 years into that, this organisation sprouted, your name was mentioned, you're an ex-physiotherapist, we'll talk about in a minute, but the FMPA was created, which became a union for practitioners who were not football players or managers, because they had their different unions, but actually for the multidisciplinary team in and around that, whether that's sports scientists, strength and conditioning, physiotherapists, masseurs, and you've really had a broad sweep and brought them all under your union to really help them to get best practice, whether that's CPD, legal information, well-being, and also recruitment. So first of all, just tell us about the brainchild that was, and you know, football's been going on for 120, 130 years. How was it only 9 years ago that such a union has come to life?
Right. Well, you're right. What I would say is it's not a unique idea. Back in my time, in the early 90s, when I worked for Plymouth Argyle, first of all, and then Man City as physio, I think the conversations we had at that point were still kind of hovered around the fact that we had nowhere to turn to, and of course when I left Man City and started in private practice, did about 17, 18 years, and then I kind of figured, what do I want to do for the next 10, 15 years? I don't know if I want to stay in this particular role. So I thought to myself, well, I wonder if anyone's ever got a representative body together, because we're more of a representative body than a union, although technically you could say we're on those same lines. And so I rang a couple of people up. I had Dave Fever on not so long ago, so I rang Dave, and he was surprised to hear from me after all these years. A lad at Middlesbrough, chatted with him, and Liverpool, and I said, what's happened? Why has anyone got a kind of this representative body together? And they said no, and I couldn't believe it. To be fair, I mean, this is 2010. I thought, well, this is remarkable, and it needed to be done. And the reason it was more important, and the reason it probably came about, it was the right time to set this up in 2010, was because back in the early 90s, so when I left Man City in 95, 96, at that point I was the only practitioner in the club, with no sports scientist, no strength conductor, nobody. It was just myself and a doctor who popped his head in once or twice a week, and that was it. But as soon as I left, within 2 or 3 months, they had 3 physios, okay, and that was the start of investment by clubs who started to realise that actually it was too difficult for one person to look after the whole club, and it's worth me pointing out back at that time that my working life there, I would have done something like 340 days on the trot. Wow. Not even one day off. Now, I'm not getting the violins out here, right? Everyone was doing that. Because if you're the only practitioner, I had the keys to the stadium on Sunday mornings. I'd go in on Sunday to pick up the injuries from the previous day. And you never had a day off. Obviously, Christmas Day you're in, as you know, you play, you know how it was. And you know, just on that, I always recall coming back on the team bus. Maybe it wasn't always that we won in those days when we played away games, but if the team had done well, I remember the manager Brian Horton once turning around and saying, right, I want everybody away from the ground tomorrow. Nobody comes in. Apprentices, everyone make the calls, get everyone away. And then he just turned and looked at me and then looked away, and that's because it didn't mean me. Now, that was just the fact of life, and I wasn't the only one. We were all doing that. So I think they realised that that the investment in this side of things was important. So within 2 or 3 years of me leaving, suddenly clubs had 2 or 3 physios. Then they started bringing sports scientists in, and it evolved. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because that really, the start of the investment meant that when I looked at this 7, 9 years ago, the medical and science staff, medical and performance staff, had grown enormously in numbers, but also its significance as well. So the time was right then to suddenly look and think, hang about, there's dozens now. But perhaps there are more sports medicine and performance practitioners are probably the second in numbers after the players. It's a huge group. So the time was right then for organisations this to set up, because it would have been no point in 1995 when there was only 30 qualified physios in the game. It's got no value. So the time was right, and I think for me the time was right, and the two collided, and that's how we set it up.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I was at Man United, I signed in 1993, and I was there till 2002. We never had a sports scientist.
No.
You know, we had a couple of physios, a masseur, but that sort of GPS analysis and them other providers wasn't there.
No.
It wasn't until my father got the job just after the treble in the year 2000, when Man United moved from the Cliff to Carrington, that it suddenly exploded. More recently, me being at Sunderland, I remember having a medical meeting in the morning with the sports scientists and all our providers, and there was 22 of us in that room.
Yeah.
You know, so quite rightly, we needed somebody as a unit. I know physiotherapists have the Chartered Physiotherapist Register, myself, strength and conditioning might have the UKCA or an accredited organisation you're in with. But as you're talking about a union or a representative company, somebody's going to help you in case you lose your job, somebody's there in case you need some type of wellbeing support, counselling. You know, it's really forward thinking of what you've done. Yet in the environment, you would have thought it would have been there years and years before.
Yeah, I think it was just, you know, I mean, having done it now, I can see why no one else did it previously, I'll be honest with you. It's been an arduous task, and it's taken a lot of commitment, and I think it needed that. I think a couple of people had tried it prior to when I started, but they'd soon given up because it was just too difficult. But I guess, you know, it's one of those things. If I get my teeth into something, I won't give up until we've achieved it, and that's why it's become what it is today, I guess.
Well, certainly with my history, more recently leaving Sunderland, you know, I had a couple of options. You know, what do I do? Do I, with my contract dispute, do I try and fight something like that myself? And do I get a lawyer to help me, solicitors to help me with that? Do I go to the PFA, you know, the actual football association? But I went to you guys, and prior to actually being released from my duties, I was a bit worried. We've been relegated twice. I spoke to you on a fair few times, and I was like, you know, what's your thoughts on this? And you guys have been brilliant, and the association you set up, it's not just a massive company where you got automated services, it's people behind the phones, and I would certainly advocate to everybody who are working professionally within a professional environment, you know, to definitely be a part, become a member, because not one, you protect yourself, but also long term you're helping an organisation which is going to start to offer some fantastic CPD and fantastic other segments which we're going to talk about in a minute. But you know, a solicitor come to my aid through you guys, free of charge, help me to go through all the negotiations and to help me to get a really good deal, and I want to thank you, Martin, for doing that for me. So again, I've had real insight into this side, and that's why I'm here to talk to you, to really promote what you're trying to do. But before we get deeper into that, you was obviously a physio yourself. You worked in the highest levels, really. So you said you was at Plymouth, you was at Manchester City, and as a young lad, did you always want to become a physio?
The truth is, I didn't know what a physio was until I was 19, so I'd already done my A-levels, and I stumbled across it and decided, yeah, that was for me. Again, no real vision about going into football, but I did about 10, 11 years working in the NHS. I worked abroad, I worked in the Middle East for a while, worked in Canada, went to Gibraltar, worked there for a year.
How did you get to travel around with that then?
Well, at the time as a physio, the really high demand with physios, and so there were agencies there.
Okay.
So you could just ring an agency and say, I want a job in this location, you'd get one.
Oh, wow.
So it was great. But there were always jobs in our journal abroad. And whenever the journal popped into the department in the hospital, everyone would go straight to the back pages, looking at, oh, that's a great job. Look at that one in Jamaica, or might do that, might do. And I got the impression that everyone talked about it and they never actually did. And I thought, oh, sod this, I'm going to do it, you know. So there was a job in Saudi Arabia. I applied to the agency and said, right, I'm going. And I went, and I had 3 years there. Then I did a year in Canada. And so you could get these jobs in that time. So I just maximised it really, and had a great time doing it. But I was learning a lot as well. Back in this country, went back to Newcastle where I trained for a while, and then set off down to Plymouth. And I was just working down there, and
So what did you just apply for the Plymouth job, or did it come up? Or?
Yeah, well, I was actually working in the officers' mess at the Naval Hospital there because one of the Gulf Wars was on. So I was working there, and the newspaper popped in at lunch sometime. I picked it up and saw on the back page, and it was a picture of a player being treated by a private practitioner, and it said because on the departure of the physio so and so is gone, and I thought, now then, so they haven't got a physio. So I thought, right, I might do this now because I wasn't playing football myself anymore at an amateur level. So I rang the club and got talking to a guy who I thought was just somebody in the office, and I was telling him a little bit about myself, and he was asking things, and then he said, well look, there's no game Saturday, but we're training, will you come up to the ground? And I said, yeah, who's trying to ask for? He said, just ask for me. I said, who's it? He said, I'm the manager, David Kemp.
Oh, wow.
All right. So I went up on the Saturday morning. Well, imagine, if you've not been in the game, but you're a big fan of football, you walk into the stadium, they come and meet you, take you down onto the pitch, you suddenly think,
wow,
oh, this is great. So I started the job there with them, did 18 months there, and then funny enough, the same thing happened. In that I came home at course season, I'd done a season and a half in the first division at that time. So we were playing the likes of Newcastle, West Ham, so it was a great ground, fantastic ground.
So what year was this?
This would be 90, would it be 90, 92, something like that. And then I came home and I saw on the back page of the national newspaper that the physio at Man City had left. And so I did the same again. I thought, oh, I'm going to check up on this. So I rang up and they said they hadn't appointed. So then I got my CV together and I thought, I'm just going to drive over it and go. So I went over, met the assistant manager. He said, come back tomorrow. Met up with Peter Reid, who was there at the time, and went over and had a chat with them. And by the time I'd driven home from that chat, 40 minutes later, the phone was ringing as I got in and said, you got the job.
So you're brave then? So you're actually really quite brave, aren't you?
Well, I think you have to push yourself a little bit, I mean, you have to kind of put yourself out there a little and be brave enough to kind of just ring and say, look,
And do you think that still is the case now?
It is, because, I mean, when I look back and think, was I just lucky at the right place, right time? But, I pushed myself, I got myself up from Newcastle and went back down went to Plymouth, which was kind of a whole new ball game again. What am I doing here? Why have I moved on? If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been there when the Plymouth job come up. So I think you kind of have to push yourself in our professions a little too. You can't just sit back in a comfort zone and expect the job to come to you. You have to kind of almost put yourself out there a little.
So you actually made your own look, didn't you?
In a sense, I guess you do.
And obviously you get that opportunity at Man City, Peter Reid. Yeah. They're obviously not doing bad at that moment in time. I bet there were some great experiences. How long was you there for? I was
there for 4.5 years. I mean, they were stable at the time, but to go to a Premiership club was terrific. And I've got the likes of Niall Quinn and Keith Curl was there, Gary Flitcroft, Steve McMahon, and it's a whole new level, of course, from Plymouth, if you can imagine. So, I mean, I remember coming to Old Trafford on the bus under the tunnel, and and you still pinch yourself as a physio. You sometimes think, what am I doing on this team bus going in? I'm just physioing opening, but it's a great experience, and but I think it was a tough time. It's tough as well.
So whilst you was there, then you obviously got all these players and. Players like they're quite high demanding. You're not just doing physio. I imagine you're doing some stuff in the gym as well. You're doing some rehab work, and suddenly you mustn't have been there on your own. Did you have assistants, or was it just you?
No, for the first 18 months it was just myself. You have to do it all, and there's two parts to our role. There's the physio side, which is technically easy. So when you get a player into your room and he goes, "Oh, I've hurt my knee" or whatever. That's bread and butter stuff for us. We can work it out, diagnose it, know what it is, to the treatment plan. The side of the job that nobody's prepared for, and they still aren't prepared when they go in, is what happens outside of that door. Because you're part of the management team in a sense, you're part of the staff, and you're in a unique position in a way. You're kind of on a fence in a way, in that you are staff, but you're in contact with the players a lot, and you're not part of the tactical side. So you have to learn how it goes on, and so I had to learn on the spot, about getting the kit together for away matches. I mean, interestingly at Plymouth, you have to do all of that, get all the kit there, and then sometimes, I remember the first manager used to drive up to see his family in London and say, you bring the bus up. So you'd be sat there as the only member of staff on the bus with all the players, and you're sat there, and you take the team up to the hotel, then you're booking them into the hotel, then you've got pre-match meals to do. and then the manager will come later on, and then the next day you're taking the warm-up. So you've all those things to learn about, and you have to learn who's who in the game, and you have to learn how you position yourself. And you know, the best way is to keep a low profile. We don't try and go in and pretend, look at me now, I'm here. We just get on with our job, but it's challenging.
Yeah, I think for me, looking at a physio, you've got so many aspects you've got to learn, really. And you're talking about somebody who knows what to do on the bed, you know, sort of musculoskeletal what to do, but then stepping out your comfort zone, like doing the warm-ups, you know, that's difficult for some physios, especially if they're not that way inclined, or going into the gym. I did a recent talk in Durham where I spoke to 300 physios, and we talked about some simple theoretical strength and conditioning practice, and you know, they was very, very much out of their comfort zone when I was speaking about certain aspects of that. And again, that's why physios, which become very much more of a management role. You know, in each of the jobs I've been into, now you normally have the doctor, then the physio, and that's sort of the hierarchy, then your sports scientist, and then strength conditioning, then your masseur. So again, you've got to manage people, and all the potential young physiotherapists coming through. You know, there's a lot to take on. It's not an easy role, and it's certainly something where you work a lot of hours. The commitment you've got to put in towards the individual players, communicate with your multidisciplinary staff, and then up to the management. You know, it's not an easy job, is it?
It isn't. I think going back to the time when you're kind of isolated and just working on your own, that still happens, because then at the lower levels, you know, there aren't all these big 20-odd staff. True. You know, sometimes, you know, lower clubs you're just on your own again. But you're hitting a point there, Mike, and that is that are you equipped to step in from the NHS into a football club and manage that position? Very difficult. Now, I've been qualified 12 years before I went into football. What happens to the new graduate who's got no experience at all, who steps into a football club? Now, you might think that doesn't happen. That can't happen, because when you qualify, you've no idea. It's like qualifying in medicine. You haven't got a clue. You start to learn then. So why is it that physios in particular can step into a professional football club as soon as the day they graduate? And it still happens, and they are not equipped clinically, medically, and they're certainly not equipped in the rehab side, and they've got no experience, and they've got no idea of the role of the job outside. So you'd be surprised that still is allowed to happen, and it's one of the challenges that we are trying to tackle.
That's an interesting point to bring up, because I had Dave Fever on the podcast a bit back, and we talked about how the very experienced physiotherapists now who end up losing their job, or managers change, but they got lots and lots of years in the game, they sometimes find it hard to get back in, because there's thousands, and now even in my game, strength conditioning and sports science, there's so many people getting qualified in these arts, so to speak, but they're desperate for the first job, so they're willing to get paid very little, but also they got very little experience, and they can potentially make lots of mistakes, where you got your highly qualified ones who find it hard to get recycled, so you're actually losing all the ones who got all that sort of craft knowledge who can't get back in, because obviously they want to get a better salary. They probably got houses, families, mortgages, so they're moving off now into private practice, and that's being lost. And then you got these young lads coming through, and again, you know, because you are the FMPA, you know which people are getting these jobs. Why do you think clubs are allowing this to happen?
It's down to money. I mean, it can only be down to money, and a little bit of ignorance as well, in the sense that they have an obligation to, I'm sticking with physio at the moment here, but they have an obligation to employ a qualified physiotherapist, and if you're a qualified physio and you tick that box, and you're only going to ask for a very low salary because you're out of a job and you just want to get into a football club, they put the two together and they think happy days. So we'll get rid of him that's been around 10, 15, 20 years earning a big salary, we'll save all that money, and we'll get someone else in, and well, it's a physio, isn't it? That'll do, and you can learn on the job, and that's it. So the standards in some respects can be poor. It's slightly different for sports science, because sports scientists train for 3 years in sports science. Remember, physios train as physios, not to work in football, and it's not just orthopaedics, it's all aspects. And sports therapists just do sports therapy, so they're a little bit better equipped, clinical sense, if you will, or from the training. But again, still no life skills, still no experience. It helps that if you like that and you step into a club and you've got people there, senior people that can guide you, and I can see how that can help mitigate the fact that you're not that experienced as you go in yourself. But in cases where, you know, bottom of Division 2 and Conference Premier, you know, you can find yourself on your own. And I would challenge anyone to say that they're getting the best of care.
It's quite interesting, you know, that sort of discussion sort of between having a head physio who's very experienced, he can proliferate all that information down, and making your mistakes maybe with the younger players, yet we know how much value and how much time are being put into these younger players. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, these young players are being recruited, they're being highlighted as potential pathways to the first team. Yet you say you might have somebody who's had no experience really in the football world, but they need to practice somewhere, so maybe that's the right environment. But if they do get sacked, I suppose, or released from their duties, physiotherapists have a much wider span to be able to get jobs away from football. Where the sports scientists, strength and conditioning, sort of masseurs, to a degree, a bit like physios, but sports science, strength and conditioning, within that environment, they are sometimes specialists for that actual, you know, football. So when they lose their job, they find it really difficult. You know, we got a mutual friend who's done some articles for the FMPA, Scott Pace, who's a great lad. You know, he worked at Sunderland and worked all his way up to the first team with Dick Advocat, Sam Allardyce, but then was released of his duties. And for the last 2 years, he's found it hard to get back into the football world. So now he's trying to do private stuff. But again, when you step away from football, and now you're in the private, you don't get that same buzz.
No, and it is harder for the scientists and sports therapists and strength and conditioning coaches, as you say. But in a sense, that's a little bit about what we're about as well, because while these professions, and of course, you know, there's lots of professions we're looking after. We're not just looking after the doctors, physios, sports scientists. We've got the analysts now.
Yeah.
We call them FMPA with the performance side.
Nice, yeah.
But we also look after the healthcare providers, the club. So we'll have some chiropodists that provide services.
Yeah.
Every club's got a chiropodist, haven't they? Or podiatrist. They've got a nutritionist. They've got a sports psychologist. Most have a dentist that use, etc. So we kind of embrace that group as well. And just on that point about the membership we've got, those working in the game, those providing services, we do have a healthy raft of associate members as well.
Okay.
These are people who are any of those professions I've just mentioned that want to get in the game, and they join in order to get access to the jobs that we post in the magazine, and to connect and network with practitioners in order to prepare themselves to apply for jobs as they come up. So we've got those 3 groups that we look after.
Yeah, brilliant. So just here we're talking about, you set up in 9 years ago, you had key people like Dave Fever and others really pushing the association to make it, you know, a union, an association. And through that you developed into many different areas. You have your conference once a year. So where is it this year?
We've had it for 6 years now at the Radisson at East Midlands. It's a conference. It's quite a unique event because it's a conference and awards. So we're the very first to bring everybody together for a day-and-a-half event, and we have an awards event on the evening which recognises the work that our staff do and the endeavours and the successes of what they do. Yeah,
and I've been to that in the past. It's a great event what you'd hold there, and brilliant. I suppose, can people support that? Can people come along? Well, what's the prerequisites for that?
I mean, it's not exclusively just the members, although it's mostly a member event. But we do have after people from other sports that come along because the educational content is really top class as well. So they'll come along for that, and of course we've got sponsors and partners that help support that event.
So for other FMPA members who are listening to this now, you have your magazine, and you deliver CPD, so explain how they can get best practice out of that, and also people who may be watching this who are interested in increasing their knowledge within this side. You know, can people even subscribe to this if you're not a member? Is there like a paid magazine they could get, or is this CPD? Or
well, in terms of the magazine itself, I mean, the magazine evolved from an A4 sheet that we sent out years ago, and we've now got maybe a 50-page magazine, and it's going to evolve again in the next season or so. I think the unique point of that magazine is, do you know, if you get some of these academic journals where it's all technical, it's part of a PhD, it's part, you have studied and seen all of this, and at the end you've got 5 pages of references, and you kind of look at all that and think, I mean, they're great, and of course they're necessary, but the translation of information from reading one of those articles into practice is virtually nil. It just doesn't happen. Where we sit in the middle somewhere, and in the sense that we will take an article like that and we'll change with the authors, the author will change how we format that, so it becomes almost like a day-to-day article about something that you might do on the cold face at the ground level, and we figure that it's not a blog, but it's an extended blog, if you will, and it's written at a great kind of level that you could read it and almost afterwards think, you know, I'm going to do that on Monday. I think that's a great idea. So it's very popular for that. Plus, it's got news about members and stuff and things like that. But I think that format, being quite unique, is one that's got a chance to develop. So in a sense, by reading those articles, that is CPD. We do also post some of those extensive kind of academic journals content on our website as well. So we kind of do the donkey work for you. We find an article that you might appreciate from an academic perspective, and we put it on for you. So the education side of things comes from that, and we're also now just launching into videos and video content, and I'm hoping to, you know, with the help of yourself, I'm hoping to try and get video content that at a professional level that we can send out to members and that they will appreciate having the time to look over. So we've got all that side of it, and the conference is educational, of course, as well.
Well, of course, time is money, and it's the way people consume information and then how they act upon it. So like you say, I mean, the number of times I've read journals and fallen to sleep, you know. So again, you want something you can apply quite quickly, because, you know, even myself, you're thinking, right, we've got this issue with maybe, let's just say like a groin injury, you know, he's come away from the physio, but we want something quite dynamic because we're in the gym. But what is best practice? How are we going to make sure we use it in all planes of motion? Is it going to be strength, endurance? You know, so these articles, what you're producing, are really good by practitioners who've been in the game, and they know how to do that transition from something very theoretical to something really applied. So I really took a lot from that. But again, you know, reading is sometimes difficult to do. You know, audio is a great thing. That's why I do podcasts myself. People can listen in the car, and of course, video. Then you can actually see things. And you can see how the coaches are doing it. So I think the line you're going down is brilliant. And you were just saying before, you've got 1,000 members at the moment. Over 1,000, yeah. And you've had a more recent association with the Manchester FA, and I imagine that's only going to get your numbers to increase even more. So tell us a little bit about that and why you've decided to go down this route.
Yeah, I mean, in a purest sense, linking with Manchester FA is nothing to do, well, it is to do with the FMPA in a sense, but it's a tangent to what we're about. I mean, we're a member organisation, and our focus is our members and their needs, and we have to look after them, which is why we look after them legally, and education, we look after them with jobs, making sure all the jobs come on our side, and we look after their well-being as well. But, you know, in developing this association, we've had to stand on our own 2 feet, really, and the history of it is one that
but surely, just before you had to stand on your own 2 feet, but I can imagine the people you're helping, the football clubs, surely the FA, the Premier League, or there's other stakeholders there who have funded you and helped you to come along. You're surely not doing it all on your own.
No, we've done it all ourselves.
Really?
Yeah, all ourselves from nothing, and we're still on our own as well. We've not actually managed to leverage funding from any of those bodies as yet. That
sounds incredible, because you know, something what you guys are doing, like I say, first-hand experience. You would think, you know, somebody, whether there's a government who would say, you know, there's value in what you're doing. You know, let's support these guys, because ultimately, you know, it's like any industry. You know, people can be working too many hours. People can be expected to be doing things way past their remit. So without having you people there to support us as a union, you know, is best practice really being done? So I mean, I'm a big advocate, and you guys out there who are watching, potentially, you know, how can we help the FMPA to create some type of more funding so you can deliver on what you're doing? You know, it's brilliant.
I think that is the key, but I think the journey is one that, when you first start this off, people will look at you, people like you've just mentioned, the FA, PFA, everyone will kind of think, who's this guy, what's going on here? And I think I heard that somebody said, well, don't worry about it, it's just some northern guy, it'll fold soon, don't worry about it.
Really?
That was the first thing. But we decided we wouldn't, you know, and we kept on going. And then after the first couple of years, they realise you're around and think, well, okay, they're still about. Then they start to see the magazine emerge, and they see the conference emerge, and then they start to think, well, no, maybe we should have a chat with these. So don't get me wrong, I've been in touch with all of them. I've been for a chat and discussion with all those parties several times, But I think you have to kind of, I'm expecting really what their thoughts are is you've got to prove yourself and prove that you're here. And one of the things we had to do was to kind of say, well, look, we can stand on our own 2 feet here. So then I had to kind of look at how do we raise revenue ourselves in order to stabilise the organisation and make sure we're here to stay permanently. So we have to come up with a couple of ideas, and this is bringing it back to the Manchester FA. So a couple of things we wanted to do to bring more revenue in, which is a key point of my job to stabilise it. And this is why I had to do it. And one of them was the fact that we had all these elite, highly skilled, qualified staff who, as you mentioned earlier, were losing their jobs at times and moving out of the game. And so we have this cohort of people that have worked at the top level in elite football, probably considered to be some of the best in the world. And we thought, well, we've got value here. What do we do for these people? Apart from the fact we want to keep them as members and we want to care for them, what can we do with this group? And then you look at it at the opposite end of the spectrum. You look at the medical provision in grassroots football, and it's still the same as it has been for 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. It's still a case of somebody running on saying, oh, let me stick my thumbs in it, get in that hot bath, go and run it off. That's still happening. So we thought, well, can we not put those in touch with those? And this is where we developed something called the Football Medicine Performance Register.
Nice.
So we developed a register of practitioners that have left the game and that are in private practice or available for consultations, and then we've now got to try and connect with grassroots football to put grassroots football in touch with that register. And although it's taken quite a while to get to this point, one of the things we've worked with the past 12 months was to do a pilot technically with Manchester FA to say, look, this is a resource that we've got. Surely with all your 35, 40,000 players within the Manchester region, what do you do for these players? How do you look after these players when they get injured? And the bottom line was that Monday morning they get a call from somebody and say, oh, my son Johnny's hurt his knee, where am I supposed to send him? And the people, staff at Manchester, go, well, I don't know, I mean, look in the other pages, whatever. Wow. But to have this elite practitioners that they can signpost people to is fantastic for them. Yeah. So it's a great synergy really between the elite level and grassroots, and we're building that. So now we've developed this partnership with Manchester FA, who were really quite pioneering really as regards FA's goal. That's what's happening already. So they're signposting now practitioners with these grassroots. Now, you mentioned earlier about, you'd think, well, hang on, if I'm taking my little son to go and see Liverpool's ex-physio or United's ex-physio, it's going to cost a fortune.
Well, that's what you think, yeah.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Okay.
And that's because what we say to our practitioners is, look, you're going to make a living out of the fact that you've been at, Preston or at Blackburn or Burnley, whatever. You're going to make that as part of your marketing strategy. You're going to make a living out of it. So why don't you give a little bit back to the game now? You've made a living out of it so far, you're still living off it. Give something back to the game by giving a discount to grassroots players. And that's what we're trying to build now. So in actual fact, it will end up seeing the best practitioners at a lower cost. But that's great for everyone in football, isn't it?
I think it's incredible. I think it's a really good idea. Not only are the kids and the parents of the children getting to see someone who's worked in the game, but also, I suppose, the physios who work at that lower level can also tap into all that knowledge. And like we said before, this lost art, this lost craft, let's make sure that's disseminated to all these people, all these teams, so yeah, I mean, so the register wise, if it is the Manchester FA, if it's other FAs, or it's somebody who lives in Manchester area and their child is injured, how would they actually be able to find, what's the route to get this service?
Well, the Manchester FA are working on this alongside us as well. So they've put it out to all their members, to all their players, to the clubs. And we've a couple of things that we're going to do. One, we've got the signposting the register. The second thing is, which is quite innovative and great, I mean, Colin Bridgeford at Manchester FA has been really behind this, is that if you get a critical injury, a serious injury, then in a sense, the FA will not have an obligation, but they may have a safeguarding issue in the sense that they have to have a pathway and how do they deal with that serious injury? How do they assist as an FA? And when we kind of approached them to look at what we were doing, this became an answer for them. So they've set something up with us now that if you get a serious injury, so if you get a dislocation or a ruptured Achilles or a cartilage, something major, that if you contact the Manchester FA, they will then contact us, and within 24 hours we will have one of our practitioners in your location that will give you a call, and they will actually get you in for an appointment if that's what's needed at that point, and it'll be funded by the Manchester FA.
Well, that is incredible. That is fantastic. That's a service which I'm sure all FAs in the country, once they hear about it, will be thinking, wow, we want a part of that. You know, that really is innovative. And also for a parent whose children are playing football, you know, these injuries do happen. Yeah. And you imagine your little Johnny Age just got injured. You're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Where's the provision? Where's the help? Are you going to take it to the local physio who probably had no history in football injuries, but suddenly now this pathway creates that almost reassurance, and like you do as a union, like you've done with myself, you know, through the legal education, recruitment and wellbeing, now this extra support to say, you know, your son will be our best practice all the way back to full fitness. That's incredible, really.
So the service is there. That's what all it's about. I mean, it's not that Manchester is saying, oh, you must go and see these. They're just signposting.
Yeah, of course.
To us. So if they contact the FA, but they will have heard of the FMPA now, and we've got to work on that, and we are doing such a lot for our practitioners that are on there. Social media, I mean, we're on it full time now, promoting these practitioners and the FMPA. I mean, if you promote the FMPA register, you're promoting the practitioners. So we've got to get that across to all the players in the Manchester region, so they can continue to go about what they want to in playing football, knowing that, oh, hang on, there's a problem, and if there's an injury, they've got somewhere to go to. Hopefully they'll go straight to the FMPA site, and they'll be able to see the process there. Or if it's a serious injury, and they'll find a practitioner then, but if it's a serious injury, they'll be notified. The FA get notified anyway if it's a serious injury, and they'll want to make sure that they look after that person as well. So this is quite unique in the country. It's never been done before, and it's great. But what we're also doing, Mike, is we're going to do a couple of sessions a year, where at a Manchester FA meeting where they get either the coaching or the staff or the players from all the clubs that they deal with. Into an evening session, if you will. Then one of our members, we will facilitate where one of our members, be a strength and conditioning coach or a sports scientist or a physio or a doctor, to come along and discuss their practice. So we might get a scientist that comes along and says, this is how you do the warm-up, or this is what you should do if you have this injury, or this is what you should do if you have that, and this is how to work in a gym for optimal fitness. And we're going to help do a couple of sessions at least each season, so that people will get to come along, hear the best speak, and get to know about us as well. Yeah,
that's a great service as well, and it's transitional information, which, you know, sometimes with social media, with so much in the past, there wasn't enough information. You had to go to your local library and read books. Now there's that much information, you don't know whether you're coming and going half the time. So to have that FMPA organisation giving you the very best of best practice, which can be delivered by not overly qualified, but people who work in that environment. So like you say, so the physio needs to deliver some type of warm-up. Well, what warm-up is it? Do you just get them jogging around, or are you going through some maybe like a ramp process, or whatever the situation is, what is right? So again, information is so important. This partnership sounds brilliant with the Manchester FA, but as an association yourselves, the FMPA, as you're getting bigger and bigger, and you're going to get more people wanting to join, as we know clubs are employing more staff members, grassroots now, even you look at, say, Salford and other teams, they're getting more employees who will want to be a part of this association. So where's the future, and which other partnerships are you open to be a part of?
Well, in terms of the register, as you said earlier, we'll now go around all the FAs and try and put this in place in as many as we can. Yeah. And we can facilitate that, and that's something.
And how many different FAs is there?
Well, I think there are normally about 38 or that region, but some of them don't actually cover a region like Manchester do. So it's a bit of an anomaly that. I think if we can get over 20, 25, 30 FAs on board, then that'd be great. But you know, this is a project that is exciting, and it's fantastic for everyone that's involved. But we don't lose sight of the fact that as an organisation, we are about our members.
Of course, yeah.
That's what we're about, and it's looking after their interests. So in terms of moving forward now, there are a lot of things that we can do and can do better. I think you know, in this journey we've had to lay the foundations, we've had to do all the hard work of establishing and staying in the frame and letting people know that we're here to stay, and then developing the magazine and the conference and the legal side of it. So we've done all of that now, and I think now's the time to try and really focus on our members' needs. I know that sounds a bit odd after 9 years, but I think we've now got we're now in a position where we can challenge some things that are happening. You know, don't forget, one of the reasons I set this up was because I knew that 20 years after I'd left the game, that people in clubs were still having the same conversations as I had in '95. And you think, how can they be having the same complaints, the same conversation? Why is it not being challenged? And we've got to start to challenge them now for the betterment of the game and to raise standards. I mean, that's what we're about, to raise standards. So we're going to put that knowledge together and we're going to drive that forward now so that we can improve services, and it's really about the welfare of the players, isn't it? So that's what we're about. So that's where we're heading now. That's where we're going. We're going to start challenging and highlighting some of the issues that concern us, and that's our main focus.
Like saying now, the FMPA has got to a point now where it is a voice, and it is a voice for their practitioners, and if best practice is not being done, you can stand up on a platform, whether that's local region, whether that's national region, you know, and really state what should be done. So, you know, without getting too controversial, with the power you guys have got now, with the likes of coming on shows like this and the press and the radio, you know, what are 2 or 3 areas you think, you know, should be delivered better, or provision? You know, what impassions you at this moment in time?
I think there's still some investment needed. I mean, when you think of football, you always think of the big clubs, and of course, like United and Chelsea and Arsenal, that they've got so many staff and budgets they can bring education. But you know, I maintain a lot of focus on, you know, the football leagues, because it's not like that. It's not like that at Accrington, as you know, or at Rotherham or at Barnet, you know. So I think the education side is still important. Let me just tell you a little story which you'll be aghast at. A former Premiership side in the Championship, and the head physio says, I want to bring my staff to the conference. Great networking event, chance to meet everyone, great educational, it's really important. So it goes to the financial director and says, look, can I just have, we need about £600 to take 3 or 4 staff to the event. And the question to him was, well, is this mandatory? And he said, well, no, it's not mandatory. He said, well, we're not paying for it. So that physio then had to go to the players, to the captain, and say to the players, look, to the captain, out of the players' fund, which you know that they collect the fines and all the rest of it, can we have some money to take some staff? And they had to pay for it out of the players' fund. That was only 3-4 years ago at a former Premiership club. How can that happen? How come we'll only give the education if it's mandatory? Other than that, you're on your own. And I think education is really important, and that's why we're going to start delivering it online now, and that's vital. So the education side is still very important. Don't get me wrong, the FA are doing quite a lot of educational posts there, and I'm sure they're going to deliver. But I think that's still important. We already touched on the issue of raising standards, and is it right that we have practitioners in place that don't have the knowledge really to be able to deliver? That's giving a short service, if you will, to the players. You know, that's not fair to them. So that's an issue. And then there are other issues, you know, along the lines of what we call governance issues, really, where, you know, we have a lot of foreign managers in now. They bring foreign staff in, and it sometimes makes life difficult for practitioners that are established in clubs, because they're answerable not to somebody who is clinically aware as they are, but somebody that a manager's brought in who happens to be a masseur, and they're saying, well, you know, maybe this is the person, I want this person to oversee the medical department. That kind of area, I think there's issues to discuss and to talk about. But there are a raft of things that we need to look at now, and that's just a snapshot.
Yeah, there's plenty of issues there, like you say. First hand at Sunderland, we've had some managers, and they'll bring in 10 staff members, and you've got quality local staff who've been there, they've learnt the trade. Next minute you're getting people like you said, generally from other countries who are just being floated at the top. You look at their qualifications, you think, there's no way they should have this job role. And then they're sending players off here, there to foreign specialists, foreign surgeons, and it causes overdraft of issues, you know, because we know there's very good practitioners in this country, as in, you know, surgeons, you know, and then suddenly they're being sent off to people in America, Italy, France, and you're thinking it's a vast waste of resources when really we've got a lot of good things going here. So yeah, I mean,
challenging, isn't it?
It is challenging
for the staff.
And of course the problem is the turnover of managers. You know, I think something in the Championship is every 9 months. In the Premier League now, Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson have left. It's dropped down so much. So as a head physio and even the medical department themselves, I've been through it so many times at Sunderland. You feel think, oh my God, somebody else is coming in. What's going to be the repercussions of this? You're worrying about your job. You sometimes have to be a bit of a yes man first of all. Then you're trying to establish a relationship. Then you can be a little bit more talk about, you know, what is actually needed and experiences, and there's all types of issues. And it is a difficult environment to work in.
It is very challenging, yeah. And you know, going back to your point, I think it's fair to say that if there's a practitioner at a club, you know, a sports scientist who's not happy with a certain regime, if you stick your head above the parapet and complain, well then you know what's likely to happen. You're on your way, and it's maybe down to us to represent those people and say, well, actually we're raising our head, you know, and we're going to tell you what it is, because we're not going to lose our job in that sense. You know what I mean? So I think it's supporting and taking on board some of these needs. And really, the forum now is for all our members and practitioners is to say, well, what we're saying to them is, right, you tell us what's happening at ground, what would you like us to deal with, and then we're looking at ways of doing that.
Well, the two things which I think stand out from your association is that you know, there is always going to be turnover of staff, but you're there to help that process. Really, really good, and that's excellent. And also the well-being aspect you have, which you really put a lot of thought and time, and the counselling, because when people lose their jobs, it's not just a financial hit. You could be away from your family a lot of the time. Suddenly you're not sure where your salary is going to come from, and also the mental health, because this is a major issue coming up now, not just in children in schools or people in this sort of very quick society with instant gratification, but you know, regular solid guys who lose their jobs, it puts a lot of pressure on them.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a big talk about depression, bankruptcy, and divorce, and I know it's very high in the physio world and also in the multidisciplinary team in footballers, and you guys have got something to try and help them through that process.
Yeah, we have, and in fact the Premier League were kind enough to sponsor us within a mental health event, if you will, recently, only about 2 months ago. So we set up an afternoon. We did it at the Etihad actually, and got practitioners up and did an afternoon event based on mental health. But it was really about our members. It wasn't all just about, well, the players, because everyone thinks it's always the players. It's not. This one was about our members and what they're suffering. But we also looked at what is the best care pathway that's supporting mental health for players and managers, etc. Because we feel that we had a voice that could say that actually what you're doing is not how we would do it as medical and healthcare practitioners. But it was about our members, and you're right, when you're suddenly at a club, you're part of you've got a position in the community, haven't you? You know, even at a small club, you're well known, you're the club's physio, you're on the bench every game, you know, you've got status, you're well known. It's a great position to have, and to suddenly get told, can you just go down and speak to the manager or CEO, and you go down, you've been there 4 or 5 years, you might have been there 10 years, and you go and say, yeah, what's meant to go, the manager doesn't want you around, you can go, and that's it. Now, people always think, well, that can't happen these days, you've got to have written warnings and all this, but it does happen, because of course it happens to a manager. He can go in the next day and suddenly he's sacked. So it can happen, and it does, and it's devastating. And suddenly the rug's pulled from under your feet, you've got a wife and kids, you've relocated there, you've got mortgage, schools, and suddenly you've got no job. So it can be devastating. So we get the first call, of course, because people ring and say, oh, I've just lost my job, and we say, right, this is how we're going to support you, this is what we're going to do, and we have a raft of things that we put in place to try and help, including the register and giving them access to putting articles in the magazine, and then we try and call them every couple of weeks or thereafter to say how you're doing and support them in the best way we can. But the mental health side of it is obviously important for us.
Well, last question before we move on, and I think it's quite an interesting one on my behalf, because in the summer, myself and 2 other practitioners got released from Sunderland, but I was in the FMPA, so I had that support and that network behind me. The 2 of the other boys didn't, and they felt very, very silly at that moment in time, when suddenly I'm getting legal advice, I'm getting support, but they didn't have it, and they had to go and find externals to do that from. And you talk about membership as in, you know, the cost, but the cost is so little. You know, what's the actual cost?
£15 a month.
So it's £15 a month for the association to help you in many, many areas. And I know there's practitioners up and down the country who are working elite sport and working further down the food chain, so to speak. But, you know, just explain to them very quickly, you know, and I think you're crazy if you're not a part of this association, and become a part of the association, because at some point you will need it. Yeah. You know, so do you have any final comments on that? You know, I don't know what your percentages are of in and out.
Well, I mean, it is a nominal cost. I mean, probably the legal fees that you incur if you're not part of the membership are going to be way higher than the cost of membership, so it doesn't make sense. But it's not only that, it's the fact that our lawyers are working for the LMA 1 week with the managers, and have got loads of experience in the game. They know how clubs work. You've got to know the industry. You can't just be a solicitor just down in a local village that picks this up and says, oh, I'll sort it out, because as a practitioner you may well go down that path, but you can lie awake at night thinking, I wonder if I really did get everything I was entitled to, because our lawyers are specialists and they know the industry and they know how to get the best out of a club. So the legal support's fantastic. Of course, the contracts were appraised as well, evaluated for part of the membership. Yeah. So you can get if you're signing a new contract, you can get it checked over, make sure that it's right, and of course that's vital in case you do get dismissed at some point. So that in itself is worth the membership, but it's also the support that we offer when there are issues, and there are issues. I mean, you know, it's an environment. It's a bit of a pressure cooker environment, and there are conflicts, and sometimes we have members that ring up and say, I'm having a real bad time with the manager, or I've got a problem with a player, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to tackle it, I don't know how to challenge it. And I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a trained counsellor, but I've a lot of experience for the past 10 years with what's going on in the game, plus my experience in practice and in the game itself. So I do my level best to talk them through it, to try and find a way of dealing with these issues. That's really important. I mean, I must deal with maybe certainly one call a week at least. And then, you know, we're developing the education side now, so we're going to start delivering on that in video form. And just that part, being part of an association, knowing at the back of your mind that, you know, if something does go wrong, I have got somewhere to turn to now. Now, what happens is some people think, oh, I'm okay, I don't need it. And then when they start to get a problem, they suddenly think, should have been a member. And what used to happen, they used to join, especially when a new manager comes in and think, well, I could lose my job. They join, and the next day they ring up and say, can I have the legal support? Oh, yeah, of course we did at the beginning, but we have to knock that on the head. So you have to be a member for at least 3-4 months before you can get those services. But quite right. And I think it's just knowing that support framework is there. And that in itself is value. There
was certainly value for me knowing that it was there. Percentage-wise, do you have any figures on knowing, you know, is it 1 in 5 are not a part of the FMPA, or is it something like that?
No, I think we've got maybe 2/3.
2/3, yeah.
You know, but there are some, of course, that think, well, you know, if I lose my job, I'm not bothered because it's not my career. I don't want to be in. I'm part-time. Some of the doctors are only part-time, so they're not going to. They perhaps think I'm only in once a week, so I'm not really that bothered. So you're always going to have that element, and you're going to have some that think I don't need it because I know everything, you know. So you always have that, and I think we can just do a little bit better in terms of numbers, and I think we're working hard to do that. But that's just part of the nature of the association.
So one more question, I suppose. It's the FMPA, and it's just with football. Have you ever thought of branching out to rugby or tennis or other areas?
We get that asked all the time. All the time, and I get that. And you know, we have quite a few rugby people and other sports professionals working in other sports that are members at associate level. You know, this level where they get access to the magazine, and that's because they're interested in what we've done and they wish we'd do it for them. I think there is potential to bring those groups together and to offer them something similar, but I have to get this 100% right first. I have to get the funding now, and I have to be able to work with the administrative bodies and the stakeholders and to go down that path. So we've got the real blueprint in place as to how to take it to its ultimate point, which is being a part of the fabric of football, part of the funding capacity as well that's in football, and then delivering to our members. And who knows, maybe another few years, if we get that right, and maybe I will back off, who knows whether I might try and help someone else to do something similar.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, Eamonn, you've been a great help to myself. I think what we spoke about, there's a lot of advice in there, you know, to potential members, to members themselves, to what the future of the FMPA is going to try and bring for everybody's benefit. So, I mean, I think we'll finish on that. Sure. I think it's been really, really good. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, just personal ones, really. For yourself, we all have this sliding door moment in our lives where you could have gone that route or that route. And for yourself, who was your biggest mentor who actually helped you along your process and ultimately led you to this position?
Do you know, I suppose I've been a bit of a maverick in the sense, you know, of my profession in getting up and moving and travelling abroad and just putting myself in places and be able to do it. So I don't think I've been in place long enough to have a mentor that's kind of guided me. I've just had to take my own personal journey. But like I say, fortune favours the brave a little bit, and maybe if I hadn't have had that type of personality, I wouldn't have ended up where I am. In terms of now, in terms of, I don't specifically have mentors as such, but I have a lot of support. Yeah. A lot of support from some key people in the game and experienced people in the game that I can contact at any point and just throw questions to and get some guidance from. So that's what I do. I mean, I'm an administrator now. I listen to what our members want, and then we'll try and act upon it and try and facilitate that plan. So that's what I am. So I don't suppose I've had one person that's given me that's been inspirational as such, because by the time I find out who they are, I've probably moved on.
No, but I think we'll finish on this point. But again, you know, sometimes you might be working on your own in a club, like I was sometimes, and you think you need to know everything yourself. But networking is massively important. You know, networking, stretch out. Most of the time, people want to help you. Most of the time, people are not trying to embarrass you or to expose you. You know, so especially within our association like this, you know. Network and you know, learn from all different environments, all the multidisciplinary teams, because you can't do everything yourself. No. You as a maverick, but I say to everybody, be maverick in your own regard, but make sure you spread the word and network loads. Eamonn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
All right, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Speak to you soon.